Welcome to Washington Watch with Congressman Walter Jones. Each month, we take a look at the events happening in Washington, D.C. and how they affect our lives here in eastern North Carolina.
Beautiful little horse. It is God's gift to the world. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you for...
And now, here's your Congressman, Walter Jones.
Welcome to the January 2014 edition of Washington Watch. Today's guest is Congressman Steve King, who represents the 4th District of Iowa. He serves on the House Agriculture Committee, Judiciary Committee, and Small Business Committees. Congressman King attended Northwestern Missouri State University and later built his own business, King Construction Company. Mr. King went on to serve 6 years in the Iowa State Senate before being elected to the United States Congress in 2002. He and his wife, Marilyn, have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Congressman King, welcome to the 2014 Washington Watch in the 3rd District of North Carolina.
Well, thanks a lot for inviting me on, Walter, and I appreciate the work you do here with us in Congress.
Thank you. Steve, the issue of amnesty, illegal immigration is a very big issue in the 3rd District of North Carolina, and I want to commend you today on the work you have done nationally, and you've been seen as one of the strongest advocates of protecting the Constitution of America as it relates to illegal aliens. I want you to share with our viewers that why you are so committed, and I do join you, by the way.
Oh, yes.
In your belief that America remains strong when we follow the rules of law.
I was raised in a law enforcement family, Walter. My father was a manager of state police radio stations, but it goes deeper than that. He would sit down and read to me and lecture to me on the Constitution, and he would open up law books and he would read the statutes to me and explain what it was anchored to in the Constitution and say, here are your choices with the law. You can abide by it, or if you disagree with it, you can set about changing it. That's the system that we have. And so that I was steeped very deeply in great respect for the rule of law, because that's the structure and the order, the guardrails that keeps our society civil and safe and sound. And the rule of law is an essential pillar of American exceptionalism. We wouldn't be a great nation today without the rule of law. Many people come to America because we do have the rule of law, and we're watching as it's eroded by an open borders policy and people in government that don't have that same respect that you and I have for the rule of law. That is the centerpiece of this immigration debate. I always capitalize it when I write it. Rule of law, R and L, 2 capital letters in there when I write rule of law, because it's that important to me.
Well, Steve, in just a moment we're going to get into the Republican position, particularly in the House on the J Committee, which you serve on, and certainly you have influence. You've been part of that debate in the J Committee to kind of let the people of my district know what is being proposed in the J Committee. But first, let me say that you and I have talked many times on the floor and other venues about the fact that legal immigration based on the law is what makes America great. It's the illegal people who want amnesty that can destroy what is a great nation, and not those who want to come here by the legal process and do everything required to become an American citizen. I speak to them every July the 4th. They ask me to join the federal judge in eastern North Carolina. The federal judge will administer the oath, and then he'll call on me to welcome the people, and my heart always jumps up to my throat because I see the faces of these people from all over the world, and they came here legally. They want to understand our Constitution, our laws, and be a productive citizen. So, Steve, would you give the viewers an idea of, in 2013, I know that the J Committee was taking up 2 or 3 bills, and can you give 1 or 2 examples of what was being discussed and what you think was the drive behind it?
I can, and I'd reminisce also that just as recently as last Friday, I spoke at a naturalization service in Sioux City, Iowa, and there were 15 that became naturalized American citizens, Americans by choice, and of those they came from 12 different countries. And so I just want to reinforce what that means to you and it means to me, is that of all of these pillars of American exceptionalism, the rule of law, freedom of speech, religion, the press, the right to keep and bear arms, most of that list is within the Bill of Rights. They see all of that, and then what it does is the image of the Statue of Liberty inspires people all over the world, and we get the cream of the crop to come here. Sure. We get the vigor of the generations from every donor civilization. That's something that makes America special. Every nation is built by immigrants. This nation is built by inspired immigrants, built upon generations of those who are inspired. So with that in mind, when we meet in the Judiciary Committee, and where I've been a member of that committee now 11 years and a member of the Immigration Subcommittee for that, and the Constitution Subcommittee for that duration of time, we debate these things fairly thoroughly. Often, though, not to my satisfaction.
Sure, right.
And of the bills that have come out of that committee and Chairman Goodlatte's step-by-step process, rather than dealing with the House Gang of Eight's amnesty bill, there are several. One of them is a pretty good domestic security bill that allows for and encourages local enforcement of immigration laws. And it's fairly long and complex, but on balance, it's a pretty good bill. You're just never going to get the president to sign it.
Sure.
There's one that's a STEM bill that would be the science, technology, engineering, and I think math is the last part of that. But one that promotes that we bring people in who have educations or are getting education at the higher levels where we need some skills. That's an okay bill, except it expands legal immigration. And until we enforce our borders and enforce our immigration law, I'm opposed to expanding legal immigration. Today, we're legalizing about 1.2 million people every year. And that's the most generous nation in the world by far on immigration. Then a couple other pieces. We had a hearing on what one might refer to as the DREAM Act. And that's one that does grant amnesty. And when you mentioned amnesty, I think it's important that we define it. And I'm pretty close to, I think we'll agree on this, Walter. But the definition of amnesty, and I use this quite often, is to grant amnesty is to pardon immigration lawbreakers and reward them with the objective of their crime. Whether it was to come here to work, whether they wanted to be a citizen, whatever they came into the United States to do, they get to continue doing that. And it's a pardon for the crimes that have been committed. And perhaps they didn't commit a crime. Some, about 40%, overstayed their visas. That's not a crime. That's a civil misdemeanor. It is a crime to cross the border illegally. That's about 60%. But even of those that overstayed their visa, if they use false identification in order to work in the United States, that is a crime. It's called fraud, and we know about the document fraud. So that's the scenario we're dealing with, and I'm constantly arguing that we cannot be rewarding people for violating the law. If you do so, you get more lawbreakers, and it devalues citizenship if you hand it over to somebody who is, and it's amazing to me that people who are unlawfully present in the United States, illegal aliens, many of them criminal aliens, now have the audacity to march through the halls of Congress and join together and protest that we haven't handed them a citizenship card as a reward for them breaking our laws.
That obviously has happened very recently. As we're taping this show, it has happened today. Let me go again. Here, this show is in 2014, January, and in 2013, Mr. Boehner, the Speaker of the House, hired a young lady named Rebecca Talent, who worked as the Director of Immigration Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and has also worked on as Senator John McCain's Chief of Staff. I'm sure you know something about Ms. Talent. I'm sure she's a fine lady. There's no problem there. But your feelings about 2014 and Mr. Boehner's desires in hiring Ms. Talent as an advisor?
Well, Walter, you and I sat in a good number of meetings during 2013 on how we were going to strategize to preserve our border security that we have left in the rule of law. Our goals were, let's get through this next month. We've made it all the way through 2013 without amnesty being jammed through the House of Representatives. Now I think John Boehner realizes that level of success that we've had joined together with others. And if he were going to go out on the marketplace and hire somebody to come in and be his immigration policy person inside the Speaker's office, I don't know how he could have sent a stronger message than hiring Rebecca Talent. She also was staff for former Congressman Jim Colby of Arizona. who was an open borders amnesty fella. And Becky Talent then, after he retired, went to work for John McCain, worked her way up to chief of staff, and when he ran for president, she was his advisor, went to the presidential campaign. And then after she left John McCain's office, she went to work for a bipartisan think tank to be the one that was promoting immigration policy. Well, the bipartisan think tank really means that we're for amnesty and rewarding the folks that are, at least those that are here, and bringing in tens of millions of others. So she has a long experience with immigration policy. I don't have any doubt she's been brought in to drive immigration policy. I don't think there have been any reservations about that message that is emanated from the Speaker's office. Right. My hope is this, that even though she has been on the open border side of this thing for as far as I can track her career, her batting average isn't so good. And that I don't remember Jim Colby getting amnesty passed, and I don't remember John McCain, although she was involved in 2 or 3 broad, comprehensive immigration reform legislation bills that were drafted over in the Senate. So she has a lot of experience, a very low batting average, and I want to keep her batting average exactly where it is.
Like where it is. All right, let me get to the outside the Hill groups that are pushing for amnesty or illegal immigration reform, whatever. You and I both know those groups that are wanting to make the change that maybe Mr. Boehner is kind of listening to. I'm not saying he does. I don't know what the Speaker does, but these groups have certainly been pushing the Republicans to take the lead on this issue that you and I feel so strongly about, and thank God many other members too. The politics of it, Steve, and sometimes that got you caught in the middle of it because of your strong position. And again, thank you for that position.
Well, the politics of it, you wonder how can Republicans be for amnesty? What would be the philosophical argument that it's a good idea? And I don't have that unraveled yet, but I do know this, that the election, when Mitt Romney lost the election, was November 6th, 2012. On the morning of November 7th, 2012, some folks within the Republican Party were already saying that Mitt Romney lost the election because he had uttered 2 words, self-deport. And that was a complete surprise to me. I'd been involved in the presidential election all along, intensely involved in it in the Iowa caucuses. And I thought I heard all of the debate that was going on, and I think if I could have gone out on the street and asked people, they would have said, no, the election was about jobs and the economy. It was about nothing else, actually. It wasn't even about repealing Obamacare, the way it needed to be. It surely wasn't about immigration. I can tell you for a fact that there was no debate of immigration that went on between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. But yet they still put up the immigration as the reason Mitt Romney lost in order to justify their argument that now we have to embrace an open borders policy or Republicans will never win another national election. Mm-hmm. Nothing upholds that statement. The data doesn't, the exit polls don't. It would have taken something like 70% of the Hispanic vote for Mitt Romney in order to win the presidency, and of course that number is lower instead of higher. So it doesn't hold up that Republicans need to do this for a political reason. And I set that off on the side as just a false argument. Then why would Republicans be for this? I think there are many of them that aren't actually thinking it through. Somebody told them that was what you're supposed to repeat from your talking points, and then it just took root. So let's set that aside. Now let's examine the Democrats. They've always been for open borders, long for open borders, perhaps not always.
Right.
And they're tremendous political beneficiaries in this way, that of any of the polling that you look at, and I'm not a great adherent to polling, but it'll show that of the newly arriving immigrants that come in, so the Hispanic vote, actually specifically Hispanic vote, at least 2 to 1 will vote for Democrats. And depending on who did the polling and how they asked the question, it might go all the way to 5 to 1. Democrats have known that for a long time, and they're happy to sacrifice the rule of law for political gain. That's what's going on there, and people are being manipulated by race, by ethnicity, by national origin. You and I are not about identity politics. No, I'll say this I know about Walter Jones, and I agree with what I know is in your soul. We are all created in God's image. Amen. And when anyone who's created in God's image deserves an equal opportunity under God first and under the law second. And so when we delve into identity politics, then you're creating victims groups. and those victims groups then have to be pitted against each other, and it creates friction in our country. Democrats are doing that successfully. They are good at it, and they spent millions of dollars calling Republicans racist. And that's a far bigger reason why Republicans lost some percentage of the Hispanic vote, because of Democrats calling Republicans racist and getting away with it. So that's how I would explain what's going on here. Rule of law being sacrificed by Democrats for political gain in the process of identity politics, pitting people against each other, calling Republicans racist. That's the biggest part of the equation. Some Republicans have been deluded into believing somehow they have to embrace this agenda or we'll never win another national election. I don't buy that, but we must stand on the rule of law, and we must defend everyone's individual, God-given liberty and right to those rights that are in the Constitution, and those rights that come along and say this Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is another place to look.
Well, Steve, you really just gave a great explanation and statement about your belief of what is important to America, and I join you in that. And I hope that those of us who feel strong about this in this new year of 2014 can galvanize, and you've done a great job. In 2013 you had rallies up here in Washington, and I know you will in spring of 2014, and especially if the House leadership led by Mr. Boehner decide they want to put an immigration bill on the floor. I look forward to being one of your teammates on that effort, following your lead. Let me ask you, we got 2 or 3 minutes left. The issue of Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Act, is creating a big problem in my district. I'm sure it is in your district in Iowa. Any quick thoughts on that?
Well, yes, it's offensive to me to be forced into Obamacare. I spent 4 years fighting Obamacare. The first 3 years trying to defeat it and undo it, and the last year dealing with the beginning of its implementation. Last October, just a couple of months ago, my staff reminded me that I was going to be under Obamacare. And to tell you the truth, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about how it affected me. I was completely wrapped up in how it affected everybody else in the country.
Right.
And I didn't think about it so much as Iowans, as Americans. We were all in this same boat.
Amen.
So I've been fighting Obamacare, and when the 11th hour came, I'll say I knew I had to buy it by law, and I respect the rule of law. Doesn't mean I have to like it.
No.
And I started the process before Thanksgiving and chugged along. Our drop-dead deadline was December 9th. So towards the evening, after I gathered as much information as I could, trying to find a policy that doesn't pay for abortion, I found out of 112 policies to choose from, only one would insure me, my wife, and not fund abortion, even though it violates the other principles of conscience that are being litigated by the Catholic Church right now. Right. And so late in that evening, I finally, after a long ordeal, clicked the mouse. Now I own an Obamacare policy. I'm not sure yet, my premium doubles, my deductible triples, and my liberty is destroyed. So that's what I think about Obamacare right now. And if the rest of America goes through the same ordeal that I did, I'm hopeful that they will push back the way they did on Rostenkowski's car in Chicago about 3 decades ago.
I remember that. And Steve, I'm with you. I'm hoping this year, in 2014, that there will be a push by the American people on Congress to say to the White House, you need to come back to Congress and see if we can find some areas that we can work together to bring some peace and some flexibility and reduce the cost of health care to the American people. So thank you for your explanation. And I was the same with you. I had to find a health care program under Obamacare too, and it was not easy. Steve, we just got a few minutes left. I want to thank you for joining me in my bill to say that the freedom of speech in our churches and synagogues, you've been a co-sponsor for several years. We're going to push that again. And I would like to say to you, Marilyn, and your 3 children and your 5 grandchildren, Happy New Year, and hope that this year, that with the help of God, we can have a better America for the American people and the people of the 3rd District. Thanks, Steve, again for being on the show. In about 10 seconds, Glenn Downs, my Chief of Staff for 20 years, is going to be on the show, and we're going to talk about 2 or 3 issues that you have brought to our attention in the 3rd District over the last few weeks. So, Steve, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. God bless you, Walter.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, my friend.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Welcome back. I'm delighted to have Glenn Downs. We always seem to have quite a few issues we can discuss in a short period of time.
Thank you, Congressman, for having me back again. I know our time is short, so I'll get right at it. You and Congressman King were talking a lot about the rule of law, and you talked about it in the context of immigration, and that really dovetails in very nicely with some of the thoughts that people have been expressing when they contact your offices. And one thing, whether it's the immigration and open borders, or whether it's Wall Street on the other end, where it seems like that a lot of the people that will be your voters and your constituents, people that play by the rules and they pay their taxes and they do what they're supposed to do, are starting to feel really squeezed. They're starting to feel like real suckers almost. If the suckers are the ones that play by the rules, then if you're on Wall Street and you screw up, you get bailed out. If you are illegal immigrant, you can come not only into the country illegally, you can walk the halls of Congress, as you and Congressman King were talking about
today.
They did
in December.
What are some of the thoughts that you have on the breakdown of the rule of law and what that might mean in very practical terms for people in Eastern North Carolina?
Glenn, I think it's true, and that's one reason I want to thank you and everyone on the staff for doing a great job. We try to stay in touch with the people. I go home every weekend and do this much as I can to get around 22 counties, which obviously can't do it all, but let people know we're there. We want to listen to them, that the commitment we made 20 years ago is still there. We want to do what's right for the people. And I think our country is a crossroads, quite frankly, and I believe 2014 is the crossroads. And whether we're talking about immigration or whatever the issue might be, I think that for the American people, the 2014 is going to be the time that this country needs to find out where it's going. And that can be anything from the debt, the deficit, to creating jobs, to education, whatever it needs to be. We need to find out where we're going, because I'm very concerned about the direction of our country in this year, 2014.
I'd like to revisit one of the topics you and Mr. King talked about, and this is business of freedom of speech in the churches and the pulpits. And you back up just a couple of feet from that, and we have now, it seems like there's this business of political correctness, and certain things or certain topics are now are sort of off limits. You're not supposed to even talk about them. And there's some indication that in churches, you talked about abortion coverage as part of the Obamacare laws. To even talk about certain things, certain lifestyle choices and the like, is considered to be hate speech. And so maybe more than ever, this business of ministers being able to speak their conscience, whatever their religious conscience is. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and why people might be concerned about that?
Yeah, it goes back to Lyndon Johnson, 1954, and I think it's becoming more and more of an issue now, and I'm going to thank you for bringing it up, that if you're a 501c3, which most houses of worship are, and you have any type of speech that might be construed by the Internal Revenue Service as political, you can lose your tax status. And I think more and more that there are those within this country that are anti-freedom of religion, and I think they target certain churches and synagogues and possibly mosques in this country. And it's my hope that in this year of 2014, the House should move a tax bill, and it would be my hope that maybe the committee led by David Camp from Missouri might look at repealing the Johnson Amendment that I just made a point of mentioning to your question.
So if I understand it correctly, the problem right now is that if ministers say things from the pulpit that the Internal Revenue Service declare to be off limits, say this is you're engaging in political speech, not political activities, political speech even, then they can lose their tax exempt status.
Absolutely, and it usually comes from a third party complaining to the Internal Revenue Service that they had heard this in a church or been told this was in a church. And if they make a complaint with the Internal Revenue Service, the service does have to investigate it. And we've got examples of this, and it's been written up in national magazines. And to me, that if you are going to have any hope for a nation to remain strong, a minister, a priest, or rabbi, or cleric needs to be able to speak freely without feeling like that the government is listening to what they've got to say. And so I'm hopeful that in this year of 2014 that Chairman Camp will put in language in the rewrite of our tax laws, which he says is going to be forthcoming, a repeal of the Johnston Amendment to take that threat of the federal government out of the churches, synagogues, and mosques.
I know our time is short here, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you something about government spending and getting government spending under control, which Congress isn't doing a very good, and the President is not doing a very good job of. As we speak, Congress has just recently kind of kicked the can down the road yet again, and the next thing coming up, I suppose, is the debt ceiling. And how much of an appetite do you think the people out there in the country have, and the people here in Congress have, to have another showdown over that?
Well, it probably will come in February, and it will be a need to raise the debt ceiling so we can borrow more money to pay last year's bills. And I've been voting against these for about 17, 18 years now, and we'll vote no again in February because I just don't see how we continue to grow the debt and think that we can deal with the problem in the short term. Certainly in the long term, we cannot do it. And so, well, Glenn, you gave me a chance to give a quick answer, but we've got 21 seconds. I want to thank you. I want to thank Steve King for being on the show. I want to wish those of you who are watching this show, and especially our men and women in uniform, a happy new year, and hope that 2014 will be a better year for you and your family than 2013, and a better year for America. Thank you for watching the show. Happy New Year.